We're talking villains. It's the dog days of the summer. What that means, the days are long, it's hot. In the Canadian Premier League, you're playing each other a lot, whether it's CanChamp, potential playoff ties, 4 regular season matches alone, and if you add to the fact that some players have been here for 7 years, well, players are, quite frankly, sick of each other in some instances, and we've seen in the past couple of weeks those frustrations really start to boil over. Since the league started in 2019, we have had our fair share of villains, and don't get me wrong, I say villains as a term of endearment. I love a villain, a heel, someone who can get under opposition's skin and winks at the camera when he knows that he's on. I'm talking Charlie Trafford, Joe DiChiara, etc. Obviously, Jose Escalante has to be on that list as well. But I've challenged Wheels and Ollie to come up with their top 3 villains in the CPL right now. I did a player poll the past couple of days, and I will share some of my findings after. But first, I want to hear who the boys have at number 3 and why.
Wheels, you want to lead us off?
Well, our team, this was a collective.
Yeah, this is a group effort.
Yes, amongst our production
Important
team
clarification.
with OneSoccer as well. Look, there's a number of different candidates. It was very difficult to whittle it down to just 3. And I, like you, Adam, I say villain in a very complimentary way. You need to matter. You need to have moments of consequence. So let's talk about the player that's had more moments of consequence than any other in the Canadian Premier League. And a lot of it has to do with winning. It's Kyle Becker. It's the captain of the best team, the club that most would consider the evil empire, the Canadian Premier League. Becker from day number 1 with the spats, with cavalry, the getting in the face after scoring goals, going to the crowd and bringing on the hate. Like, he's a player that's always found a way to get under the skin of opponents and fan bases alike. And as long as he remains the focal point on the most hated team by others because of their success in the Canadian Premier League, he's always going to be a part of that list. He's getting in the ear of a referee each and every game. You know what Becker's all about. And his demeanor, up until this year, has been surly. It's just been one where he looks pissed off all of the time. Now he's a little bit softer by his own admission now that he's become a father. But Becker, just based upon his standing in the Canadian Premier League and what he means to Forge and what that represents to everyone else, he has to make the list. So he makes his way onto the podium in spot number 3.
I think he might be coming off the list, though, for the reasons you alluded to there, Wheels. Like, I think if you did the first 3 or 4 years of the CPL, Becker and Borges would be 1 and 2, maybe a cavalry player who we're going to get onto as well would be in that mix. And there'd be very little argument. But I don't know if Kyle Becker is still quite has that same edge about him, as brilliant as a player as he still is. It's
Ollie, number 2.
Number 2, I think this is, again, another player who is falling on this list rather than rising. I think he needed to fall because the number of suspensions were becoming kind of ridiculous at this point. But it's Vasco Fry. There's no top CPL villains list in 2025 without Vasco Fry. Look, there's been a few incidents here that you're going to see on these pictures. A lot of yellow cards, a few suspensions and reds. A liking for maybe just leaving a little elbow in, as we see there on one or 2 occasions, maybe 3 occasions. But I do think there's another one. I think there's another one coming as well. I do think he's cleaned up his act a little bit, and I will say again, to the point that you have to kind of have some relevance in the league to be on this list. I do think he's a really good player, and maybe has been one of Vancouver's best players this season. But it was just keeping him on the pitch that was the problem for a while.
I agree. Good player. His name is Vasco Fry. He sounds like a Bond villain, doesn't he? Like that's the headline, and roll the tape. I mean, the video that you just saw tells the rest of the story. Like, his former manager, Ashton Goppy, came to his defense on multiple occasions, and I understand what he was saying. He plays hard, and sometimes he crosses that line, and you don't want to take that element out of his game. But although, if you talk to the disciplinary committee at Canada Soccer, Vasco Fry's name comes across their desk more than most. So by track record alone, he absolutely makes that list.
There are a few players in the CPL who can throw an elbow, but also deliver not only Olympicos, but inch-perfect crosses and pull the strings in midfield quite like Vasco. He is one of a kind in Vancouver, and they're a better team for having him on it. Okay, drum roll. Gareth Wheeler, would you like to do the honors and reveal the number one pick?
This should be no surprise to anyone who's been watching the Canadian Premier League over the last 2 seasons. It's York United's Osvaldo Leon. He is right in the middle of everything, and it's kind of bubbled over the last month with multiple altercations and teams taking exception to the way that this guy play. He does the little things that bother you, that irritate a player, the diving, the talking, the simulation, but the physicality and the kicking out, like you see here, just behind the play. He's got involved in personal spats with cavalry players. This challenge right there, the icing on the cake. And when Tobias Warshevsky, who's a very, very nice young man, is trying to have a go with you, tell you to meet him behind the bleachers so nothing's caught on camera and he can duke it out, like, man, I mean, that tells you all you need to know. By the way, Leon leads the Canadian Premier League with 7 cautions as we record this right here. And if just you ask people across the league, like, there's genuine dislike of this player and what he brings to the table. I will say this, however, him bringing this to the table made York United a much different team, one that's very difficult to beat and one that can frustrate an opponent. And I think that Leon has done a really nice job at making York United a much better side.
Yeah, undoubtedly the player in the league right now who other teams love to hate the most. I think he's got Bateo just right next to him as well, who is the Robin to his Batman, or whatever the villain version of that duo would be. But I like it with York United. I think part of the reason why a lot of teams don't like York United right now is because no one can beat them. They're unbeaten in 7 in the Canadian Premier League. They're I think the rising team in the league right now. And I think having that little bit of an edge and not being pushed around, look, there's a line you don't want to cross, obviously, and it's flared up a bit in the past couple of weeks. I'm sure they'll be trying to make sure they keep their focus in the right place. But this team is no pushover, and I've really enjoyed watching that side of them, as good as their football is as well.
And his teammates, by the way, regularly come to his defense. Like, yeah. There's times where, you know, players or teammates can oftentimes get sick of the antics of certain players within their group, and they just let them go off and fend themselves. But they really stand up for Leon. So that's just part of his game. It's very old school. Like, honestly, do whatever it takes to get under the skin of your opponent and take them off their game, and that's exactly what he does.
All right, we're moving on to the greatest CPL villain of all time. When I did my player poll, I tried to ask at least one player or coach from every team for a vote, past or present, for both the top 3 right now and the number one antagonist of all time. And I would like to pretend I was surprised by who topped the charts for that list, even from his former teammates and people that would consider him a friend. It's Jose Escalante, Oliver Platt, isn't it?
Yeah.
No way, Jose.
I mean, like,
yes,
when you ask that question, does anyone else come to your mind first, other than Jose
I will say hilariously, including again from one of his former teammates, Ibrahim Bakari, who was not in the Canadian Premier League very long, came up 3 different times, and I was not prepared for that answer.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have expected that one either. But I think there's a few names that you could throw in there all the time. We talked about Becker, and I'd put Borges in there as well. Joe Di always liked to wind up and had a tasty challenge in him too. But I think, like I said, when you think about the all-time villain in the CPL, I think everyone who has watched this league, their mind would firstly go to Jose Escalante, and I think it has to do that for a reason. So no argument from me there.
No, it wasn't just the challenges getting in the mix. Like, it was a simulation as well, which, you know, for good, hardworking Canadian players, as I speak in the words of a former commissioner of the Canadian Premier League, I mean, he represented something completely different. He represented a lot of what Canadians have experienced in CONCACAF. He got players sent off, including our very own Jordan Wilson at ATCO Field in Calgary, right around the time of the birth of his son, Jacques. So, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise, but he had this knack of just knowing. there's an art to simulation, and he had it absolutely perfected. The thing with Escalante was he was a really good player in this league as well. Like, he wasn't just a slouch that would go on and irritate. It was just part of his game, and it was part of what made Cavalry such a difficult team to play against, and Escalante specifically, what made him such an effective player.
Anything to see footage from the 2019 Vault, Mason Trafford on the pitch, those York 9 bright green kits. It's always a nice walk down memory lane. I want to say the one name.
Are you going to share?
I'm not going to spill all of the tea, but there's a few. The most common name that came up that did not crack our top 3 was Sergio Camargo. And I think it fits into the list of you need to be good and you need to be relevant, and Camargo's having a career year. Obviously, Cavalry being involved in so much right now, he's an easy shout for a player that ruffles the feathers of his teammates. There was a shout for Sean Hundal as well, which surprised me as a number 9. You don't often get that, but the players loved this game. I think they loved the opportunity to either vent or have a laugh and walk down memory lane, and that's what it's all about. The protagonists and the antagonists. And the
People got to let us know, Adam. People got to let us know who is your villain in the Canadian Premier League.
Camargo's a talker, but I don't think he's ever had a red card. I think that's.
Well, and that's why it's villain. It's not. We're not asking, and we didn't do a segment on who's the dirtiest player in the league or who gets.
Fair enough.
Who ruffles your feathers the most? Who gets under your skin?
He was
the guy that came on.
Sure.
Hey,
he's a great talker. He's a great talker.
I've gotten to know Sergio well over the past 7 years. Guy can talk. He certainly can talk. He can also score some goals. The protagonists and the antagonists on OneSoccer Direct. We love them all equally.